Well, hello everybody. Welcome back to the channel. So I would just like to take some time to talk about the trilogy altogether of the Lord of the Rings. You know, as most of you probably know, this was like one of the biggest cinema events in history at the time of its making. It's one of the great stories out there to be told, with the book series from J.R. Tolkien and all of that. It's one of the heaviest inspirations for a lot of modern day fantasy or fantasy that came afterwards, as most of you know as well. And so I'm going to talk about each movie and rate each movie. But I'm just going to do a trilogy review. I'm going to talk about them all in one shot, as I just feel they're such important movies, and are just kind of meant to be watched in sequence, like meant to be watched together. And so yeah, I'm just gonna head off with the trilogy review, and I'll start with number one, The Lord of the Rings and The Fellowship of the Ring. Now, a lot of people think that this is the best Lord of the Rings movie of them all, and it's actually, to me, it's the second best. To me, it goes, the third one is, like, right off the hop, the number three is the best. And I'd say number one is a bit better than number two, even though number two is still awesome. But yeah, so we'll go number three, number one, and then number two in my personal favorites order. But no, talking about the first one though, it's such a beautiful movie. I mean, everything. One of the things I love about the movie is the score, especially like near the beginning of the movie when they're at the Shire and stuff. Like, that's just such a beautiful soundtrack, and throughout the whole movie. And just the fantasy that it sets up and the characters that it sets up are just unlike anything that have ever been written or brought to screen before. It's very reminiscent of actual history. Like, even though it's complete fantasy, it's very reminiscent of a lot of events that truly did happen. And J.R. Tolkien, drew inspiration from all kinds of personal grievances and things that he had to say about what he had seen in his time, as well as just, analogies of all kinds of things throughout history. And this movie, the first one, The Fellowship of the Ring, really sets that up the most, I think. Like, if you don't see the first one, you'll be kind of lost, because it gets very kind of open world, more beyond the first one. But it definitely starts the narrative off. So it's definitely, you got to see the first one before watching any of the other ones. One of my favorite scenes in movie history is when the Dark Riders come up and they're hiding underneath that stump, and then the horse just slowly stops, and then he creeps over the edge, and they're just right underneath it like that. That is a spooky scene. I love that scene. There's actually, if I were ever to do a top 10 or top 20 favorite movie scenes or sequences list or something like that, this would the Lord of the Rings trilogy altogether would have tons of those scenes for all different kinds of reasons. But I definitely really enjoy the Dark Riders. They're really creepy looking. They're really scary, and just excellent job on creating them in all the scenes that they were in. Introducing Strider and all of that. Like, those characters are all super cool. I think my least favorite character in Lord of the Rings is Gimli. I never really went for Gimli that much. I found him kind of annoying. But no, all of those characters, Boromir, what's his name, the Orlando Bloom pays him, I forget the name of his character, damn it. But, and Strider, all that, all those guys are super cool. And, yeah, the movie kind of falters near the end, in my opinion. Like, I like the first half, and I think the first half sets things up a lot better than the last half, but It does start to kind of drag, and the story just does kind of start to not become as entertaining or as intriguing after a while. But it's Lord of the Rings, like, right? It's one of the most epic movies, so it's definitely worth the watch right through to the end. And I'm gonna give Lord of the Rings: The Fellowship of the Ring. Let's see, a solid A. I think I'm gonna give it a solid A. Yeah, that's my take on Lord of the Rings: Fellowship of the Ring. So moving on to the Two Towers. Now this is when um, the trilogy starts to really, really get open world. Like, it's very vast, and there's all kinds of things going on, and it's jumping from all these different places and all these different fantasy places in the world, right? And that's one thing that I think is so incredible about Lord of the Rings in general, is actually when it becomes like this, when it becomes open world, because it's so like everything seems so big, like it's just like so vast, like all the characters, no matter what situation they're in, they all seem so small compared to just this grand world of all kinds of things that are out there, right? And even the most important character, really, at the end, Frodo and Sam, the two characters, Frodo and Sam, the ones that carry the whole movie, they have the most important mission of them all. And really, even though everything is so vast, as I said, they have the most important mission that could bring change to the whole entire thing, right? But yet still, in this long epic journey to get from A to B, they just feel so like you feel so small, like when you're behind, like when you're watching the movie from in their eyes. It's just like, even though they have such an important mission, they still feel so small. But because their mission is so important, it brings just that much more intrigue to the story when you're watching it. It really is one of those genius ideas, in my opinion, just in the history of storytelling and writing and filmmaking and everything. So yeah, and this one isn't quite as good, I think, as the first one or the third one. But it again, it's epic. It has its drag moments too, like they all do, and it. Sometimes this one jumps back and forth, probably the most of any of them. It's not got, because it's right in the middle of everything, so it kind of doesn't have as much honed in as the first and third. But so it kind of jumps back and forth quite a bit, which can be a bit distracting. But everywhere they go is always top notch, like always really cool looking, always a brilliant idea. Yeah, it's definitely epic. And for grading the Two Towers, A minus, A minus. That's what I'm going to give the Two Towers. Still a great movie. It's not as good as the other ones, but I'm going to give it an A minus. I like the poster of the Two Towers the best, though. By the way, like when I was a kid and stuff like that, like in Lord of the Rings was like a fairly newer movie. I remember always being even though it wasn't exactly like people, adults, not had to say, oh yeah, no, you got to watch this one first or whatever, blah blah blah. But I was always gravitated to that one, like the Two Towers. My hand always went to that one because I liked the poster on the cover. It's still, if you look at all them, I mean, of course now there's different variations of the discs and stuff that come out on different platforms now, and now they all got a different picture and change it up nowadays more so than ever. But if you just look up or ever find just the original cover photos for the Lord of the Rings trilogy, I think the Two Towers definitely has the coolest cover photo. And so, moving on to Return of the King. Now, this is the best one, in my opinion, the best of them all, and one of my favorite movies of all time. It's just epic. It just, everything is like, all of it is kind of not fully concluded yet, but everything is just on the verge of, like, this is do or die now. Like, this is like World War III now happening right now. And it's so emotional that way, and there's just so many intense scenes and so many really just striking scenes and moments of victory and moments of loss and everything. And the musical score, like I love it throughout the whole series, but the musical scores, the way they play them, and in this one is just beautiful. Like, it's just stunning. It's awesome. And the ending, I mean, some people say that the ending, like, to me, is one of the best endings of all time. Some people say it drags on a little bit too long, like it takes too long to end. I don't know how you could ever think that. Um, it is 100% one of the best endings of all time, and it's so emotional. Like, that's just one of the most emotional endings of all time, believe it or not, is the Lord of the Rings: The Return of the King. And no, it's a tearjerker at the end. Like, as much as I think people forget about it, because I mean, everybody's seen Lord of the Rings. Well, most people have seen Lord of the Rings, but they don't, maybe like haven't watched it in a while, or it's just such a big trilogy, so they just kind of, after it's over, they end up thinking of other things. But no, the ending of Return of the King is just, it's a tearjerker of an ending. It's a beautiful ending. It's like one of the best film endings of all time. And in the music, and that too is just beautifully composed with what's going on. One of my favorite characters in the whole series, actually, which he's in the whole one. He might not be in the first one, but he's at least in the second one. He's at least in the Two Towers. But and it wasn't when I was a kid or anything. This is only like recently now, watching these movies, that I really grew to this character. Is Faramir, which is Boromir's brother. Now watch the trilogy, and you'll see the whole. It's a long story, and how they how they come into play in the story. But his character, I mean, I don't know exactly who acted him, but whoever was the actor playing him did a really good job with the character. And I found that I really identified with the character. I really kind of got behind where he was coming from. And like I said, just the actor pulled it off just perfectly for the character at hand. And it's one of those epic movies that you gotta see. One of the best of all time. I'm gonna give The Return of the King an A+. Right on, guys. So those are my thoughts on the entire trilogy of Lord of the Rings. Yeah. So hop down to the comments section if you have anything to say about the Lord of the Rings. If there's anything you feel I missed out saying, if there's anything that you agree or disagree with on my take on Lord of the Rings. And either way, I thank you so very much for watching, and hope you have a good day.